Viewers of Sararights TV. This is the Sports Desk show live here on the TV. Of course, my name is Senior Geroh, the host of the show. Remember, the World Cup games are ongoing. Which team are you backing up to win the World Cup? Is it Spain? Is it France? Is it Morocco? Is it Ivory Coast? Is it South Africa? Which team are you backing up to win the World Cup? Remember, the FIFA Big League promotional playoffs are currently ongoing. There were games played over the weekend. I'll be telling you which teams had wins or which teams had losers in so that manner. I'll be telling you some actual stories about that. Of course, internationally, there's a big one happening at Santiago Bernabeu. Of course, Jose Felix Mourinho, ever since he stepped at the helm of team Real Madrid, he has already signed already 3 players into the books, and he is desperately adding more numbers into the books of Barcelona. Real Madrid in there. Of course, we shall be discussing that with you in a lengthy time, and then we shall be talking about the issue of the finals. Of course, Terrigo DFA and Terrigo District will be hosting what we call the West Nile region main zonal league finals. So, of course, all the 3 games will be played at the Legislative Council. I'll be telling you which teams will be playing in those finals in Terrigo DFA on Sunday. That will be on the 21st of June 2026. Of Terrigo district will be hosting that in that perspective. But a big one for Ruben Amorim, of course, he will be joining AC Milan as the head coach very, very soon after AC Milan parting ways with Massimiliano Allegri. That's some of the stories that we shall be discussing with you. Of course, my name is Senior Geroh, the host of the show. Whatever you could be, I would like to thank you so much, Xavier Brown, for the list that you had with me in the morning. Of course, you were beside me in whatever thing that we were doing today in the morning. So thank you so much, Xavier Brown, for that actual extension that actually you offered to me. This goes to my friend Pakwachi from Malira City. Ronald the Portuguese is still in there. Thank you so much for always being part of the biggest TV. Rubanga Ken Morris, you are in DR Congo. Thanks so much for being part of this. Of course, our sister frequency is in Aru. Of course, you are in there, and we shall be connecting in a few moments time with you via some of the settings that side of Aru in there. Of course, my name is Senior Geroh. First things first, let's first bring it from home and we talk local sports before we go for some of those actual international engagements. Of course, Terrigo DFA and the Terrigo district will be hosting what called the first ever triple West Nile mini zonal league finals, which will be on Sunday at Ledu Stadium, the biggest stadium right now in Terrigo district. Of course, it will be hosting the finals. Of course, in that perspective, there will be series of finals that will be lined up in that perspective. Of course, the zonal mini league final will be between Johanna and the team I'm talking about, Younger Villa area. Of course, this final will be played at 12 noon. Of course, it will be at 12 p.m. in that Pacific. And then the regional league promotional final will be between FSL FC of Moyo up against Hot Springs of Yumbe. This final will be at 2 p.m. Then the provincial league final will be between Ottoman FC up against Parombo United, and it will be at 4 p.m. Ugandan time. These are going to be the biggest game to talk about in a Terrigo district on Sunday. It's going to be a busy affair on Sunday down in a Terrigo district at the Legislative Council Stadium, where we shall be there to see that we give you the live coverage of this game. Me and Ronald the Portuguese, we shall be the commentators for that game. Of course, Shinobi will be behind the camera on that day, and we shall be seeing that we give you the updates regarding the finals of the West Nile MENA finals. These games, all of them, will be hosted by Terrigo district, and it will be at the Legislative Council Stadium in that perspective. Of course, let's talk about the FIFA Big League promotional playoffs. Of course, games will be coming in there. Of course, there were games played over the weekend in that perspective. Of course, yesterday Pajule Lions recorded a first league advantage over Pakwachi Young Stars. Of course, they managed to beat Pakwachi Young Stars by a goal to nil. This game was played at Pajule grounds down in northern Uganda. And then Mutilero Soccer Club were 1-0 winners over Bomber. This game was played at Masoro Stadium down in Kisero. And Amus FC were 2-1 winners over Maida. This game was played at Amus Stadium. In there, of course, Black Star played out into a 1-1 draw against Boo Wompo United. And this remains to be seen what will be the outcome in this person. Of course, these are 4 teams that are vying up for promotion back to Big League. So my talking point is going to be between Pakwachi Young Stars and this team of Pajule Lions. Pajule Lions had a 1-0 advantage over Pakwachi Young Stars. Can Pakwachi Young Stars overcome that 1-0 defeat to Pajule Lions? Remains to be seen. Of course, Samson Sizokuti has a mountain climbing fixture in the return leg at Omar Stadium down in Pakwachi district. Can Samson Sizokuti do the magic? It remains to be seen. Of course, Pajule Lions knowing very well that they have got the 1-0 advantage over Pakwachi Young Stars, they may want to stay disciplined, they may want to stay calm on the pitch, and they may want to defend that 1-0 over Pakwachi Young Stars in that perspective. Of course, a 0-0 draw will be enough for them to seal the qualification back to the Big League. Of course, Pajule Lions has been a consistent team when it comes to playoffs in there. Of course, they played against a number of teams from West Nile region. If I can still remember very well, way back, they had games against the Black Angels, they had games against Calvary, they had games against Ondoprak Club. So it still remains to be seen whether this team of Pajule Lions will be in position to make amends and probably surprise Team Pakwachi Young Stars. But Pakwachi Young Stars, with the spending that they had in the transfer market, I think this could be the perfect opportunity for them to go into the Big League in there. But Samson Sizokuti will be actually having a lot of hard time to hard times in there to see that he handles this team very, very well, to see that the money that they spend in the transfer market to sign a number of big name players into the team Pakwachi Young Stars actually have what call an impact for them, probably to see that the best for them is with the money that they've spent in to see that this team attains promotion to Big League level. So can Samson Sizokuti do the magic to see that this team goes into the Big League? You remember, they were fractures in the team of Pakwachi Young Stars. Samson Sizokuti was closely working with Sadat Lolo, who was actually his immediate assistant, but with things that actually happened with Team Pakwachi Young Stars, Sadat Lolo had to leave Pakwachi Young Stars, and he had to go back to this team of Dramatak Football Club. And with the Dramatak Football Club, he went back home and he managed to improve performances at Dramatak Football Club. Now, when he left the team of Pakwachi Young Stars, things started actually going right for Samson Sizokuti at some point. But I can tell you, a young coach in the step of Sadat Lolo, who has got all the things that he has done for the team of Pakwachi Young Stars, Samson Sizokuti has got a mountain actually climbing actual tactics to play in the final against Pajule Lions at Omar Stadium. Of course, we all know Samson Sizokuti, when it comes to finals, he always panics a lot, and Pakwachi Young Stars will have to do a lot in there. Of course, I was thinking if this team of Pakwachi Young Stars can be important to hire Sadat Lolo in this shortest period of time, that 1-0 advantage that Team Pajule Lions picked over them can be overturned. Of course, Lolo, when it comes to game reading, he's better compared to Samson Sizokuti. His game reading is always up, and he can do something good, very, very crucial to see that he helps Samson Sizokuti to see that Team Pakwachi Young Stars attains promotion back to the start times again, back to the Big League level. So this is going to be one of the biggest things for Samson Sizokuti to do. Lolo has been one of the talking points right in West Nile football. He has transformed Dramatak Football Club. Dramatak almost went into what we call the playoffs in there, and they were beaten by team. I'm talking about Nebi Central in that perspective. Then all of a sudden he went into the team of Pakwachi Young Stars. He never wanted to leave Dramatak Football Club, but all of a sudden the hierarchy at Pakwachi Young Stars convinced him, but apparently things never went in there. But I can tell you, this Pakwachi Young Stars team spent a lot of money in the transfer market. If they fail to qualify to the Big League this season, it's going to be a very, very big thing to talk about in that perspective. So it still remains to be seen what will be the outcome of that in that perspective. So the finals will be played, or the return leagues will be played on the on the 20th of this month, and my focus will be between Pakwachi Youngsters and Pajule Lions, which will be on Sunday on Saturday, which will be the 20th of this very month. These games will be played in that perspective. So it still remains to be seen what will be coming in that perspective. Of course, in the World Cup, of course, games were played yesterday. Of course, our African teams, they are not really doing extremely very well in the World Cup so far. South Africa was beaten, Tunisia was beaten. Then this team I'm talking about, Ivory Coast, is the only team that is currently doing tremendous in the World Cup. I'll be talking about that game actually in a short while in there. Of course, the were games played yesterday in the World Cup. Of course, Sudan were 5-1 winners over Tunisia. Then Ivory Coast were 1-0 winners over Ecuador in that manner. Of course, it was Ahmad Diallo, Manchester United national forward, who rose to the occasion and probably makes things actually happen for Ivory Coast. Of course, he scored that only lonely goal in the 90th minute to see that the Ivory Coast beat Ecuador in that. Of course, Ecuador in 19 matches they have been unbeaten, and Ivory Coast managed to surprise them. And Ahmad Diallo in that 90th minute, he managed to score that actually important, memorable actual goal to see that the Ivory Coast have got a crucial goal in the World Cup. Of course, their actual hopes of making it into the playoffs is still alive in case they pick 2 more wins or games. They may be in position to see that they also cement their way through into that. Of course, for Ivory Coast, this is going to be a confidence boosting actual game. Of course, coming over the weekend, they will be having a game against a certain resilient team. So it still remains to be seen what will be coming in that perspective. Of course, in the next games, of course, we shall be seeing Ivory Coast that will be playing against the team I'm talking about. Will be playing against Germany on Saturday. So this is going to be one of the biggest things because and I'm going to be one of the stubborn teams in Africa can be able to do something against the German side. So it's how the games will be happening in the FIFA World Cup. Of course, Ivory Coast has been a dominant side in the World Cup debut. I'm talking about Konkaro. This game will be played on Saturday, so it will be at 3 a.m. East African time. So it still remains to be seen whether Team Ecuador will be having that crucial win over the debutants. I'm talking about Konkaro in that perspective. So it still remains to be seen what will be happening. Konkaro is the only nation that is actually playing for the first time in the World Cup history. So we shall be seeing how these games will be happening in the World Cup today. We shall be having series of games coming up in the World Cup. Of course, the biggest one will be between Belgium that will be hosting Egypt of Mo Salah. This game will be at 10 p.m. Then Spain will be playing against Cape Verde at 7 p.m. Then Saudi Arabia will be playing against Uruguay. This game will be at 1 a.m. 7 p.m. sharp, Spain up against Cape Verde. Then at 10 p.m. we shall be seeing Belgium up against Egypt. Then at 1 a.m. we shall be seeing Saudi Arabia that will be playing against Uruguay. These are some of the games that will be coming up in the World Cup in today. In the of course in the world of transfers, there's the big one. Before I talk about the Real Madrid actually spending in the World Cup, let's first talk about the issue of Ruben Amorim. Of course, ever since Ruben Amorim left Manchester United, he has been offline and he has not been having a club in there. Of course, he has been clubless in that perspective. Of course, there's a big one coming for him. He has been linked with a move to this team of AC Milan. Of course, after AC Milan parting ways with Massimiliano Allegri, it has been reported that Ruben Amorim has already raised into what call formal agreement with AC Milan to become their next actual manager. Of course, he will never be the coach, but he will be at AC Milan as the manager. Of course, AC Milan in the Italian Serie actually last season the team was doing actually extremely very well, and the team was doing amazing in there. Of course, the team did not actually qualify for Champions League football this season in Serie A, but I can confirm to you that the team has been one of the talking points in Italy. The team started the games very well in there, but apparently the team managed to finish out of the top 4 position, and the team did not actually finish in the Champions League spot, and it's remains to be seen what will be happening in that perspective. But there were rumors as a linking Ruben Amorim to Fulham, but I can now confirm to you that very soon AC Milan will be actually appointing Ruben Amorim to be their next head coach in the short period of time. Of course, Ruben Amorim was being linked with a number of clubs, including Fulham, including Benfica, but he said that he wanted to coach Italian side. I'm talking about AC Milan, and it has been reported by Fabrizio Romano that this guy will be heading to AC Milan. Of course, AC Milan had one of the biggest coaches that has been linked to the services. Of course, one of them was Olivier Glasner, former of Crystal Palace, but he said that he is not being heading to that actual role at AC Milan, and it has been reported that Ruben Amorim is now the primary target, and the final stages are already underway for him to be the next head coach at AC Milan. Of course, at Real Madrid, Jose Felix Mourinho, ever since he stepped into that was a coaching role at Real Madrid, things are going on well for him. Of course, he has already signed a number of big name players into his team, already signing players like Dumfries from Inter Milan and Ibrahim Konate from Liverpool, and this team of Real Madrid is actually gracing themselves so fast and very well in the under Jose Felix Mourinho. And I can confirm to you that Florentino Perez, the club president of Real Madrid, they are working hand in hand with Jose Felix Mourinho to see that the team Real Madrid comes back to light, and this team wants to be competitive in a number of trophies. Of course, coming to Champions League, coming to some of other domestic cups. Of course, Real Madrid want to be competitive into that actual tournaments in there. So Perez and Jose Felix Mourinho, they are working hand in hand in these deals. Of course, they already are in a number of big name players. We're talking about Bernardo Silva of Manchester City. Of course, Barcelona are also tracking the services on that. Of course, they have now signed. I'm talking about a player in the names of Marco Corella from Chelsea for a fee in a region of around 51.8 million pounds. Remember, Chelsea signed this guy. I'm talking about Marco Corella from Brighton and Hove Albion in 2022 for a fee of around 63 million pounds. That was one of the lucrative deals that this team of Brighton and Hove Albion got in that deal from Chelsea. When they signed this guy, I'm talking about Marco Corella, the Spanish international in there. Of course, Marco Corella has been one of the regular players that has been called up into that team of Spain. But I can confirm to you that it's going to be one of the biggest things for him. Of course, he has gone back to his actual native nation. I'm talking about Spain. Of course, Real Madrid is in Spain, and this guy wants to play for Real Madrid. Of course, he has been a graduate of Barcelona Academy, and he has been linked with a number of clubs, including Barcelona and Atletico Madrid. So finally, Marco Corella has crossed over to that team of Real Madrid, and I'm quite sure he's going to be a very big addition for that team of Real Madrid, just because of his work rate, and he is good when it comes to overlapping. He is going to be a typical Marcelo type of player. Of course, Real Madrid has been looking for that kind of player. Trent Alexander-Arnold went in there, but things never clicked very well for him. That's because the atmosphere in a new environment, you have to go in probably adapt fast before you make things happen for you in there. Of course, this is going to be one of the biggest things for that team of Real Madrid and Marco Corella respectively. But I can tell you, things at Chelsea Football Club are not actually going on well. Of course, Chelsea will not be playing in the European football. Of course, they finished in the 10th position in the Premier League. So Chelsea will not be playing in the UEFA Conference League. They will not be playing in the Europa League, and they will not be playing in the Champions League. So there is a lot that's happening in the dressing room of Chelsea Football Club. And Xabi Alonso has got a lot to do, of course, to see that he improves this team of Chelsea Football Club, to see that this team goes back to the European football. Of course, Chelsea is being one of the biggest clubs in Europe, and this team has been one of the strongest teams in England when it comes to playing the games in Europe. So it still remains to be seen what will be happening in that perspective. Of course, ever since Enzo Maresca left Chelsea Football in mid-season, the dressing room factor has been one of the biggest things at Chelsea. So it still remains to be seen how Xabi Alonso will be handling that at Chelsea. Of course, in the world of gossip today, Arsenal have started talks about signing 18-year-old Lille midfielder. I'm talking about Aibo Buandi, who has helped Morocco to a 1-1 draw against Brazil in his country's actually opening game of the World Cup so far. It has been reported that a number of clubs are tracking his services, including Chelsea, Liverpool. They are all monitoring the services of this guy. Not forgetting Paris Saint-Germain. They are all interested in the services of the Morocco international. But at least 60 million pounds has been tagged for his services. Of course, any club that actually is interested in him really are saying that they have to pay a fee of around 60 million pounds for this guy. I'm talking about Buwadi. He's a fantastic player. When he scored that game, that goal against Brazil, you look at his actual celebration. That's clear that he is a player of his own. Only 18 years in the World Cup. That means alone. For him, and it still remains to be seen how he will be cement his position in the World Cup. So far, of course, a number of clubs are already interested in his service. I've already said to the clubs that are already interested in his services. Real Madrid are talking about him, Paris Saint-Germain are talking about him, Liverpool are talking about him, including Barcelona. This means a lot of a player of his caliber. He comes from Morocco, which means he is a very, very brilliant player. If protected very well, he can do well for one of the biggest teams in the world so far. Of course, Bayern Munich's move for PSV Eindhoven's Morocco striker, I'm talking about Ismail Sabir, 25, could be made more difficult with his actual high-profile goal against Brazil. So it still remains to be seen how this will be happening in there. This is according to the bill. Of course, Brighton defender, I'm talking about Jan Paul Van Hake, 26, says he will resolve actually his future following the World Cup actually. After the club rejected 2 bids from Tottenham Hotspur and Netherlands international, he said to be interested in joining Tottenham Hotspur, and he said that after the World Cup, that's when he will be thinking about his future, whether to leave Brighton and move. And of course, he has been one of the loyal players at Brighton, and he has stayed a number of years in the team of Brighton. So it still remains to be seen what will be happening in that game against them. What will be happening in the transfer market for him. Of course, he is desperate to leave that team of Brighton. Of course, he has stayed there for a number of years, and he wants to play Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and Dizabi. Of course, Dizabi is one of the coaches to talk about. Of course, he has transformed a number of young stars, always all players, to see that they perform to the billion in there. So it still remains to be seen whether the Netherlands international can be important to leave Brighton and join Dizabi at Spurs. Of course, Manchester City have set their sights on Everton centre back. I'm talking about Jared Braithwaite, the 23, as a replacement for departing player. I'm talking about Johnson, who is 32, and the Toffees won a fee of around 70 million pounds for the service of the England defender. Jared Braithwaite being a constant player that teams have been talking about in the transfer market. Arsenal has been talking about Liverpool. Somebody was talking about him. Manchester United was talking about him. But now into the mix is team Manchester City. They've already started talks about signing this guy from Everton. But Everton are saying that if any club wants him, the club has to pay a fee of around 70 million pounds for his services. But I think this deal could be easily be done by Manchester City, just because they signed Johnston from Everton, and they now want to sign his direct replacement again from Everton, and Jared Braithwaite will be desperate in joining Manchester City, one of the biggest clubs in England right now, and it still remains what will be happening in that perspective. So this is some of the biggest things happening in that manner. Of course, that is going to be one of the biggest things to talk about. Of his Jared Braithwaite, when it comes to some of this kind of moves, when it comes to playing in a big stage level, he is good in that. But I think it's high time that he needed to leave this team of Everton to see that he goes into another club, probably to see that he cements his position into the national team of England. Of course, when you be playing in a bigger team like Manchester, like Arsenal, there you'll be what's you'll be having that was and not be England, but I think going like Manchester City could add his foot in that England, because Manchester City be considered. Also been a player call up in the team of England. Because the incidents he has been having with Man City, that's the team he would be England. I think of the other boys, actually, 6-year-old is closed on a complete his move to Manchester United from Atalanta. This is one of the biggest things. So finally, this guy will be having his medicals with Manchester United on Sunday. This is the Brazil midfielder. I'm talking about Amazon. Of course, for Manchester United fanatics, this guy is not a defensive midfielder. This guy is a box-to-box midfielder. He's a dynamic player. I'm talking about Anderson. If anyone tells that he is a defensive midfielder, that person is lying to you. He is a dynamic player. He is a box-to-box midfielder. Fantastic player. But he is good in helping the defenders. That's the advantage that he's having. He can drop back to come at the defender. That's what he does very well. He goes forward into the box, comes in the middle of the defense, of the midfield, and then comes back to help the defender or the number 6 role. He's good in that. That's one to the likes of Morgan Rogers. I can tell you, this guy is a player of his own. He's a fantastic player. Manchester United has got actually an all-round player in the team of I'm talking about Anderson. He can be in that caliber with I'm talking about Matt Cunha, but Matt Cunha is more faster than this. But when it comes to playing games central in the middle of the park, he's a better than Matt Cunha. When it comes to giving those long balls, he's good in that. But when it comes to winning balls, he is good in that. Manchester United has signed a very, very actually brilliant player in the names of Anderson. In that perspective, Manchester United sacked manager Ruben Amorim in January and could make actually a saving on the sacking of Ruben Amorim in compensation of around 15.9 million compensation package following his departure from if the Portuguese take on AC Milan. Of course, I was telling you, Ruben Amorim is set to become the next manager of AC Milan. So it still remains to be seen what will be happening in that perspective. So my hopes are in that game that AC Milan will be having. Of course, AC Milan will not be having games in that perspective. Of course, before I call it a quit, let me first take you through the team news of the World Cup between France and the other team. Of course, Spain will be in contention today. Of course, they will be playing against Cape Verde. This game will be at 7 p.m. Of course, Yamin Lamar, who's anticipated in this fixture, had been meted out for weeks, and he has been cleared to take part on this game against what we call Cape Verde in the opening game of Spain's active games in the World Cup. So he has been the biggest player to talk about in there. But let me first give you the starting lineup that I think this team of Spain will be using against Cape Verde. Of course, in that team, expect Simon to be the goalkeeper, and that's actually the game against Cape Verde for this team of Spain. And then Cucurella will be on the left hand side of the pitch, and then Laporte, not forgetting Nomad, will be in the center of the defense, and then Poro will be on the right hand side of the pitch. Of course, in the middle of the back in a 4-2-3-1 formation, we shall be seeing Pedri, who will be sitting in actually that number 8 role alongside Pedri, who will be sitting deep to come and help the defenders in that perspective. Then Nico Williams will be on the left hand side of the pitch, and then Yamal on the other side of the pitch, and then Dani Olmo will be in that number 10 role. And then this player I'm talking about, Ozabayos, will be the player who will be leading the striking position in that perspective. Of course, my time is up. I needed to leave the studio for the next program to come in there. Of course, I have to call it a quit after here. Of course, in a special way, I would like to appreciate my producers, Bite Jamal and Snobby. Thank you so much, guys, for always being with us and making sure that we have got all our activities live here at Sararights. Bye-bye for now.